What's going on, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Jake and Joe Bengals preview show presented by First Star Logistics, the wonderful partner for Joe Goodberry and myself, Jake Liscow, who give us this platform to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals twice a week for you. Every week we've got the post-game show as well. We've got the preview show every week, which includes this week a larger conversation around the history of the Cincinnati Bengals, the way they've gotten to the point they're at now, where it's a third straight quarterback where they're really struggling to put together a consistently winning team around a second quarterback contract. And we've seen this for the last three franchise quarterbacks for the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll get to the news of the week, which as of the time of recording includes a defensive player only meeting, Mike Pennel asking for and getting his release to return to Kansas City. We'll get to the Joe Flacco AC joint issue, which has him in question this week against the Bears. And then, of course, we dive into the matchup with the Chicago Bears, who are not a great team, but I don't know that it matters how good the Bengals opponent is right now in many ways. So we'll get to the interesting matchup bit, some interesting statistical points about these teams later on in the show as well. And just a reminder that First Star Logistics is hiring. And if you're looking for work in the Cincinnati area, make sure you check out firststarlogistics.com for all of the job postings. One of the fastest growing companies in the Cincinnati area. Joe and I love working with First Star Logistics. Maybe you will too. Make sure you check out those job postings and see if it is the right fit for you. Joe, let's dive into a big conversation about this Cincinnati Bengals team that has fielded the worst defense by EPA per play, by points per game, by yards per game, by yards per play in the entire Duke Tobin era. That stretches back to 1999. Before Duke Tobin took over as director of player personnel for the Cincinnati Bengals, it was Mike Brown for the lost decade. Before it was Mike Brown, it was Paul Brown. And those are the three guys that have run player personnel for the Cincinnati Bengals in their history. So as we're going to go through the recent draft history for the Cincinnati Bengals and all of these misses and the reaches as you compare to consensus and all these topics, the one thing that I just kind of want to throw out there as a preamble to keep in mind is the Bengals have never effectively, outside of hiring Duke Tobin, made a move at this spot in their organization. It has been father, son, Duke Tobin. That's it. So if we're talking about changing that spot, we're talking about something unprecedented. That's the preamble that I wanted to give, Joe, before we dive into any specifics.
Yeah, and you're talking about, even with Duke, a 26-year run, right? So, I mean, we're talking completely unprecedented, completely historical if it happened, if they hired a GM. And listen, we're not even there completely yet, but I understand why the conversation's happening, and you can't ignore it. I even feel like we have ignored it at times because of the longevity Duke Tobin has had. It almost feels like a waste of time to even talk about it or put the microscope on it or put the microscope on their drafting or their player acquisition, because is anything really going to change? Are they really going to go out and get a GM or make a change at the top of their decision-making football-wise? It's hard to fathom. But this last week, man, I feel like the rumblings have gotten louder. I feel like it's coming from even all the reporters, where then to be honest, I never hear a thing about Duke Tobin from that side of like the traditional media, and they're all talking about it. So it makes me wonder if now is the time to have this conversation. People are ready. Fans want to have it. I would like to have the conversation because we have been very critical of their player acquisition and their drafting over the years. And I'm kind of like, yeah, if you guys are ready to talk about it, let's talk about it, because if it's really going to change and things are going to get better, it probably starts at that position where someone at the top of the room, sort of, I mean, you still got the family to the side of you and probably influencing a lot of what you can and can't do. But if it's going to happen, it probably starts at that position.
Yeah, that's the complicating thing, is that the family's definitely involved, right? And so
Right.
you can't fully extricate Duke Tobin from the family from Zac Taylor. They're all so linked, and that's the way the Bengals do business. When you say mom and pop business, that's what people are talking about. It's
True.
literally been pop, son, and now Duke Tobin, who's not in the family, but effectively is in the family because he's been with the team for so long at this point. So, like, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about overall acquisition stuff, maybe Duke Tobin would do things a little bit differently if he had the resources of Browns ownership, the Haslam family, for example, or the Waltons in Denver. Maybe if there was unlimited money, billionaire money from multiple generations of corporate wealth, it would look a little bit different for the Cincinnati Bengals. Instead, their lawyers and their generational wealth comes from football. And that's not an excuse, don't get me wrong, but maybe it would look a little bit different in terms of the kind of contracts the Bengals do, the way they do business, if not for the family. I think that you need to acknowledge that. But the reason I think it's coming up this week, Joe, is because, like I said, this is literally going back to the turn of the century, going back to when Duke Tobin was hired. This is the fourth worst by EPA per play since 2015. It is the eighth worst by EPA per play since 2000. That's as far back as I can go in the database I was looking at. Third worst since 2000 in points allowed per game. 11th worst. This is out of 800 defenses, by the way.
I was going to say, so like, give us a number here if you had the total. So that's exactly where my mind was going.
It's actually a little bit more than 800, but 11th worst in yards allowed per game and 13th worst in yards allowed per play. You're talking about one of the bottom 0.01% defenses in the last 25 years. Did I do that math right? If we take the most generous number here, 13 out of 800 is that's going to end up being a bottom 1.5% defense.
Yikes.
In the last 25 years.
You never want to be the bottom 1.5% anything.
And when you take into account that they laid an absolute egg against the worst offense in the NFL to make a lot of these numbers worse than they already were, that's why the conversation is happening this week. Because not only is it historically bad, not only is it one of the worst in the NFL this year in many, many stats, and if not for the Cowboys, would be probably worst across the board at pretty much every significant stat. It just happened against the worst offense in the NFL, and it got worse. So when you combine those things really come to a T in kind of what was meant to be a reset year, right? Like Zac Taylor buys himself a year to bring in a coordinator and try to fix things, and it goes the opposite way.
And I think that last point is also why it comes to a head, because it was Lou's fault, right? He couldn't get the young guys to play. He couldn't get the best out of them. It was just, the scheme was too difficult, whatever, right? We heard all the excuses, and they let Lou Anarumo go ultimately. And then it's, okay, all of these young guys are going to play, and we're going to spend 3 picks on rookies that are going to play pretty quickly for us as we find out Barrett Carter is the starter linebacker, right? First, we thought beat Demetrius Knight, Shamar Stewart, of course, but then you get 3 guys out there. And it's Miles Murphy and Joseph Osai and Chris Jenkins and the corners you've drafted and the safeties you've drafted. And it's, whoa, hang on. This whole team is pretty much all players you've acquired through the draft and free agency. Of course it is. But like the draft, you have drafted this defense and it stinks. And there is not really a lot of hope. That was one of our main takeaways, I think, from Sunday on the postgame show was, how does it really get better? If Miles Murphy's not taking a step, if Shamar Stewart's going to take a couple of years, I mean, where does it get better? Who is going to step up and be that guy? And it's just tough, man. And I think all of that means, like, whatever you're doing, Duke Tobin, leading that draft room, whatever influences and factors you're drawing in to make the ultimate decision, it's wrong. And you've been wrong now for quite a long time, and it's unsustainable. It's gotten to the point where you might as well blow up most of it. You keep DJ Turner, maybe Dax Hill. You can't find a way to extend Trey Hendrickson, which may be a Blackburn problem more than it is a Duke Tobin problem. But the point remains, you have to be able to function within the parameters and play within the sandbox this organization sets. And he is really struggling to do that draft-wise.
Yeah, I think the draft is the thing that he has more or less entire control over, right? Like, we've heard of potentially Mike Brown influencing the Jackson Carman selection, and that kind of happens less and less, and it has been happening less and less. The Jackson Carman example is the most recent one that we can think of, but the point that keeps coming up this week is all the players and we've talked about this over the years, that the Cincinnati Bengals have drafted with top 100 picks. You're talking about premium picks on the defensive side of the ball going back to 2022 when they draft Dax Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt, Zach Carter. Out of that group of players, Dax Hill had to play 3 different positions before he found a full-time role and missed his rookie year entirely because they were grooming him to take over for Jesse Bates instead of just realizing, hey, Jesse Bates is pretty good. Maybe we should keep Jesse Bates and either pair Dax with him or find
I
a
think it would have been
different
a good
spot
pairing
for Dax to play. Maybe Dax could have, embraced that nickel box safety role earlier on with Jesse Bates being your deep safety. We digress. Point is, took a long time for him to find the role that he's in now. And as a result, the development was uneven. And even now, you're for a first round pick, Dax Hill's short of expectations. We're pretty happy generally with Dax Hill this year. I think he's an NFL player, but for a first round pick, not the worst sin though, as we go through this list. Cam Taylor-Britt has been on and off the bench for a couple of years. Zach Carter got cut, honestly, too late. Was always a head scratching pick in the 3rd round and never really got to a point where he made a positive impact for the Bengals. Maybe the best defensive draft class in this stretch is 2023, which features Myles Murphy, DJ Turner, and Jordan Battle. And that's maybe the best group of defensive players they've picked.
Hey, don't forget DJ Ivy down there. All right. At least we don't know that he's completely terrible.
The point that we're talking about here, though, I don't care what you do on day 3. We're going to get to this point. I don't really care what you do on day 3. But when we're talking about premium picks, these guys need to be guys that help you. And out of this group, DJ Turner has turned a corner this year. Looks like a real solid NFL corner. He has his limitations, but he's a good cover corner. And he's even stepped up and made some plays around the line of scrimmage this year. The next year, they add Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson. Neither of those guys making a big impact. McKinley Jackson can't even get active on game day, along with Jermaine Burton last year, but we're focused on the defensive side of the ball here. And then this year, Shamar Stewart, Demetrius Knight in the top 100, and Barrett Carter right outside of it in the 4th round. And when you look at the guys they've picked, and then you look at your research, Joe, and the big reaches the Bengals have had, there's a pretty quick connection. And this isn't just like based on those of you that follow us closely know that we have, the draft board we put together every year. This is not that work. This is based on consensus across every draft board out there from Arif Hassan.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, because the consensus is important here because it's no influence from us. It doesn't matter what we think. Doesn't matter what you think, what ESPN thinks, NFL.com. Someone tweeted at me this week, said, PFF had Demetrius Knight often as the best player available in round 2 when you're doing your simulators. And I'm like, that's why you use consensus, because it balances those outliers that are going to ruin someone's ranking. It may include your own as a team being really high on a guy. Let the consensus put up guardrails is how I would use it. So if you just took the consensus and looked at the worst reaches the Bengals have made since 2015, I went back and looked at this, grabbed the consensus rankings. Where did they pick them, right? They picked Cedric Ogbuehi 21st, Billy Price 21st, versus where they're ranked. Cedric Ogbuehi's 54th on the consensus. Billy Price was like 38th or something. John Ross was like 33rd. These are I did all of them, all 11 picks. They said these are the 3 biggest reaches that they made. Would you say those are the 3 worst picks they probably made in the first round? I think I would. Second round, same thing. It said it was Drew Sample, Demetrius Knight, Jackson Cartman. It's early on Knight, but so far he's been pretty terrible. So those are, I would say, hey, those are the 3 huge reaches. Third round, McKinley Jackson, Nick Vigil, Dylan Fairchild. There's time for Fairchild to develop. I've liked what I've seen so far. Fourth round, Cordell Volson, Eric All, Cam Sample. I mean, best player there you got is Volson, who started for 3 years for you. 5th round, CJ Uzomah, best player they've drafted out of this entire list. Devontae Harris, JJ Dielman, 6th round. Brandon Wilson, solid returner. Deshaun Davis, I don't think he ever played. Jordan Evans was somewhat a special teamer, depth guy. 7th round, DJ Ivy. Mason Schreck, Rod Taylor, I don't think ever played for them either. Point being is, if you had just allowed the consensus to stop you and say, you know what, we should take Drew Sample here. Well, the consensus says, no, that's a 5th round pick. It just let it put that guardrail up and say, stop what you're doing. Don't make this pick. You don't have to have an unforced error. Take an unnecessary risk. You do not have to do this. Nobody told you to take Jackson Cartman in round 2. No one said that. Relax. just pick from the board, pick from the guys that are expected to go there. And I also did that too. I haven't done a full, I just looked at it, and it's not actually the guys that fall for them where you find the most value, the guys that are consensus 80 spots above where they're still available. The best guys are actually within the range that they're supposed to be picked, and you pick them there. It's how you got the Jesse Bates. Like, we didn't talk too much about Jesse Bates when he was drafted in, what was it, 2018? But he was consensus like 51st, and they got him at 50 or whatever it was. It was right there, and you got a good player. Stick in that range, and I think they'd be so much better. You could, even if half of these picks, even if a third of these picks were better players, it would change the trajectory that they're on right now.
You would have a functional defense if a third
Yeah.
of these guys were what you expected them to be on that side of the ball with all the capital they spent there. The point that I come to when I look at this list is like, I don't care as much on day 3, right? Cordell Volson is a reach. They could have done better, sure. Eric All had the medical flag. That's why he's available there. And that goes hand in hand with your point about fallers. There's often a reason that the public doesn't know that players fall. And that could be why the consensus fallers, if they fall significantly anyway, it's kind of like a myth. Like, it's like, yeah, our perception was that way on the outside, but this idea that they fell in the draft, a lot of times those guys don't turn out to be better. Sometimes, like if it's just a handful of picks, like the end of the first round, you often see guys succeed there. And Baltimore, Philadelphia, Kansas City, a lot of times are the teams that are scooping up the guys that have fallen like maybe 10 spots in the first round, maybe the top of the second round. You see some of this too. Maybe T. Higgins is, but that's like kind of where T. Higgins was expected to be
It
drafted.
was.
Like a moderate example of this to some degree, but what I look at when I see the list of these guys on day 3 is like, I don't really care as much. Like Eric All, fine roll of the dice. Cam Sample, before he got hurt, before returning from that injury this year,
Fine player.
honestly, for a 4th round pick, has been a fine player. He's not like making a huge impact on your defense, but he's a solid rotational piece, at least before the injury occurred. Same is kind of true for all these guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. Like ideally, they're guys that have played for your team, but it hurts a lot less when it's those resources. It also kind of puts into perspective the cost of moving back from the 6th to the 7th round for Joe Flacco. But then we look at these guys in the first 2 days of the draft, and then these hurt. Dylan Fairchild maybe is the one check mark there, right? That turns out to be a great 3rd round pick. But if you just look at last year at the guys that weren't on our radar for the 3rd round at all, and McKinley Jackson and Jermaine Burton, Nick Vigil, I think, is another fine example that didn't quite live up to the expectation of a 3rd round linebacker. You expect those guys to be solid starters.
Mm.
And the 1st and 2nd round, like those are the picks that set your franchise back. When you miss that bad, and this is only some of the misses, right? Like we just looked at their list
Right.
of 1st rounders that are like, yeah, they didn't work out, but they weren't horrific misses, and these are just the worst misses compared to consensus, and they didn't get a whole lot of out of any of these guys. And those are the decisions, like we're talking about, that take you from getting a guy that could be either a franchise changer or a significant role player or a high end starter, even if he's not a star, to what they've gotten instead out of those players and other issues like this with their draft process.
Yeah, that's basically what I come to. We go through everything, right? We use consensus to help you put up guardrails and guide us in our draft process as well when we do it in the off season. I don't know. And here's my ultimate point about the drafting for the Bengals and Duke Tobin. You're a team that functions with less resources, right? They have the small scouting department in the entire league. We don't believe they have a robust analytics department, even though they have hired a couple people over the years there. I don't believe in conversations that they are aware of some of the advanced analytics and data and things that can have predictive value when it comes to draft prospects. And for me, if you're a team that's going to, I think the Bengals more than most rely on the draft, and they'll sell the point that we're going to draft and retain. The retain part's been an issue, but the drafting has been a bigger issue lately. Like if you're a team that has to live on those principles, it has to be a foundation of how you're building towards the future. They've been unable to do that. And you need to use every resource you can available to make the best possible drafting process you can to come out with the best outcomes you can. It does not feel like they're doing that. And that's what I would advocate. If you're moving on from Duke Tobin and you're bringing someone else in eventually, if that happens, it's got to be someone with a vision from top down of how they're going to use the least amount of resources they're given to maximize it as much as possible, which means
And
I would want an analytics department. I'd want more scouts. I'd want a process that eliminates risk and brings us the most likely to hit players. And even if you're going to miss, at least I know you're not taking unnecessary risk and you're playing within the sandbox of players in the bucket. You're picking from the bucket. That's what we use. Picking from the bucket of players with the best chance to succeed.
yeah, you're never going to be perfect
You're
in the
not.
draft. If you were a perfect drafter, then you would be getting paid a lot of money. And these guys get paid a lot of money to try to be as close to perfect as you can, and that's not very good for a lot of teams across the league. And it's just right now we're in a stretch for the Bengals where it's been pretty bad when they're especially when they're not picking at the top of the round. And I think there's been some of that, at least some of that, through the last several Bengals franchise quarterbacks. They never picked as late since the 80s, uh, as they picked in a couple of these drafts, with Joe Burrow taking them deep into the AFC Championship game to the Super Bowl. So, like, that's a bit of uncharted waters for them, but they didn't do very well in those situations. And where they have done well is when they're picking at the top of the round, and that's where it is easier. But you do credit them for being really good at identifying and drafting quarterbacks for the most part, especially for their last three quarterbacks they've picked. They've been good at picking and developing receivers. They
Until
have,
lately.
yeah, they haven't been premium picks, to be fair, but yeah, you're right. They had been good throughout the draft and less so lately. They had been good relative, I think, to the league at drafting corners. And I
They
think
were.
that
A lot of premium
there's
picks there as well.
a little bit less of that lately. And that's kind of like where they thrived in the middle of the first round for a few of
Yeah.
those drafts. But they haven't been able to put together teams around their quarterback on a second contract, whether it's financial limitations, whether it's bad luck, whether it's drafting misses. That has been a worrisome trend that now we're seeing into Joe Burrow's second contract. And a lot of that, maybe not a lot of that, at least some of that is the luck they've had with Joe Burrow. But the point that you made about maximizing things, I guess, knowing that you're going to be limited, like, let's keep that limitation to the family and the way they do contracts. Let's eliminate that limitation in terms of having an approach to player personnel that maximizes information, like you're talking about, maximizing the analytics department, expanding the scouting staff, actually using every resource you possibly can that is relatively cost effective at this point, right? Because we're not talking about paying a
Right.
ton of money if you're expanding in these areas compared to the amount of money that you're losing by paying players that aren't contributing to you winning football games. And maybe that's just not the calculus that exists for them. But if we're talking about making a change, that's a big part of it, is modernizing at least that aspect of the business. Of course, if we could have our cake and eat it too, or maybe that's not the right analogy here, if we could have everything on the wish list, we would also talk about changing the way they do contracts and modernizing in all these ways. And like we said, even when you do that, no one in the NFL is going to get it right all the time, but you wouldn't very likely have one of the worst defenses in the last 25 years. Like, when you look at that list, there's some teams that show up there more than others. The Browns, for example, like the bad organizations in the NFL.
Yeah.
The Bengals show up more than you would like them to, for sure. And I was just looking at defense, but I would imagine that it would expand if you were to include stuff like trench quality and other harder to quantify metrics.
And this is the third time we've done this. We're thinking of the Duke Tobin era of the Carson Palmer, failure to put a defense around him and keep that team going past 2008, 2007. Andy Dalton, they had to fire Terrell Austin at some point, right? They couldn't. That defense was terrible at that point, and it was decent money spent, a lot of picks spent, and they had to figure that out. And they were able to rebound some, but then now they're in that again, and it's just like the game changes. And every time we brought up Joe Burrow's contract, so go back a couple of years when that was coming up, what was that, 2022, 23? We were kind of like, well, let's see how the Bengals do it post Joe Burrow. Let's see how they do it when they pay Jamar Chase and potentially these other guys. They're going to have to, the draft becomes paramount. I've got like 10 tweets that probably say that exact thing. After you pay the quarterback, draft comes paramount. You can't miss. You can't have these risks. You can't do these things. And they still fell into the same trap 3 times in a row. Duke Tobin, if he does have these limitations of this franchise, and I get it, I'm sure he does. It probably feels like he's got one hand tied behind his back. Some of his comments this spring, I felt, weren't directed towards reporters and fans, and maybe even a call out to the front office of, we expect to get these deals done. I want to get these deals done. I would sign Trey Hendrickson to what he's worth and get him for multi years, right? He made these things that were kind of seem different than they have been for Duke Tobin. So credit for him to be able to get the team as close as they've gotten with one hand tied behind his back. But at the same time, I kind of need a different approach with that, if accepting those limitations and trying to maximize what you do have. And it doesn't feel like, hey, you get 3 chances at it with 3 franchise quarterbacks and you failed to build the second phase of that roster, right? We're in that again. You failed for a third time. I feel like we got to make a change and something's got to happen.
There's also more than ever, and maybe this is another reason contributing. It felt like more than ever after the draft this year, fissures in the front office, maybe less consensus than normal on draft day, and some of the process that seemed to come to light in terms of
Yes.
how some of these decisions are getting made, just sounding amateurish at times, or at least that's how it seems.
Doesn't sound
Don't
like
know.
26 years of experience leading the draft room.
Yeah, and we're not in there. We don't know exactly what's going on in there,
True.
but it hasn't had the results. We do know that the results haven't been there, and there has been friction, I think, that we've picked up on, at least between the coaching staff and the front office over the years. Dax Hill being a chief example of this, when you listen to the way the scouts talk about him versus the way he's getting used, the way that the defensive coaching staff was deploying him. And, some of that ties back to Lou Anarumo, too. A lot of comments this week about the Bengals being wrong for firing Lou Anarumo. Maybe that's true, but I still don't take big issue with it, because they got to that point last year with Lou. They were having issues with talent acquisition, talent development. And in Cincinnati, right or wrong, and probably wrong, the defensive coaching staff is a big part of that. And so, that makes the job harder for defensive coaches in Cincinnati, because, well, any coaches in Cincinnati, because you have to be part of that player acquisition process as well. But like you said, that's the job with the
Yeah.
Bengals, and why we're talking about all these things in a season that it feels like there's certainly a lot on the line for this coaching staff.
And we're on the edge, right? Like this Bears game, we're going to talk about it here. And if they lose and you go to 3-6, I mean, all bets are off. All the good feeling, the vibes that they were able to recoup with the Flacco trade and then the Steelers victory on Thursday night, all of that. And I'm going to be there. First Star's flying me out. I'm going to be in the First Star suite. I want to see this up close, Jake. I want to see this teetering moment. I want to see which way it falls. But I think we're on the cusp of ramifications. And that's why you get the players only defensive meeting, because that's reeks of desperation. People are feeling it inside that building.
Well, yeah, you get Zac Taylor taking the most pointed shots at a player or group of players that I think you've heard with Zac Taylor as coach, looking for someone to step up, anyone to step up, looking for leaders on that side of the ball. That's going to lead to some sort of reaction from your players. And I think that leads to the defensive player only meeting, and is probably why, I mean, a lot we were talking about before we started recording, right? Like, a lot of times it's like, well, why won't Zac call somebody out? That's
Right.
probably why. It doesn't necessarily sit well with the guys that you're trying to help win football games, that you're trying to work with. Because while Zac is running the team, and that's kind of the role of the head coach, is to lead the team, they are working toward a common goal, which is the success of the team that they all work for. And so we got that players only meeting. These are all adults, some of them young adults, obviously, but Zac, not a terribly old guy himself, especially when you consider Joe Flacco playing quarterback. Uh, so yeah, you get the defensive player only meeting, then you get Mike Pennel asking for and getting his release, and immediately signing with the Chiefs, who, as soon as he became available, Chiefs fans everywhere were like, got to write this wrong, pointing to Chris Jones, talking about Mike Pennel, all these things.
Right.
Immediately returns to the Chiefs. The Bengals release coming with some sort of concession that seems to indicate that, like, hey, yeah, we'll release you, I guess, if that's what you want. And maybe it has something to do with the defensive players only meeting, maybe not. And then he just goes to the Chiefs. Like, that's such a bad look. You can't get a 7th round pick or something.
Right.
You're facilitating this move for a conference rival. Come on.
Yeah. And I think it stems from the players only meeting and probably for him looking at it like, listen, I didn't sign up for this. Like Burrow was supposed to be here. I was supposed to help these young guys. You've added to the nose tackle room since I've been here. You can probably feel that there's probably someone in the organization that would like to see McKinley Jackson play. There's probably someone that would like to see Jordan Jefferson play, right? These young guys that are on the depth. And you can probably feel that. And he's probably like, hey, listen, if you guys want to cut me, I've got a spot with the Chiefs, and let's move this on. You guys can play these young dudes because there is a feeling that they're playing these young guys on defense. I mean, we've seen it at linebacker. So if that's what you got to do to get this thing right and get all these young guys in here, and Zach's tried to say we're going to take our lumps now, but we're going to get the experience now and they'll be better later. Ooh, they've been some lumps. We've been beaten over the head a little bit.
When's it going to get better? That's my question.
That is the
When's that
question.
part?
I think they're all asking that.
When do we get to the other side of this bridge? Joe Flacco might not play this week. That's the other thing.
That's big.
Joe Flacco's got an AC joint sprain, which if you
got a
haven't,
good diagram.
Yeah, if you don't know what an AC joint is, it's where two bones come together in your shoulder, where your clavicle, which is the C part of the AC, meets a bone in your shoulder that starts with the letter A that I don't remember the name of, and there's a little bit of non-bone tissue connecting them. And when that little bit of, I don't know if it's cartilage or a ligament or a tendon, because it's bone to bone. I didn't find out exactly what it is, but it is a joint. It is soft tissue. When that either gets pulled or tears, that's where you get the AC joint, also called a shoulder separation, because it's literally two bones that make up your shoulder. I guess I should be pointing on this side where you can see it, like over in this area. When those bones separate, you literally have bones in your shoulder that are separated. So Flacco described as 50-50 by Zac Taylor on Wednesday, but Flacco didn't have his presser on Wednesday. The Bengals deferring that until later in the week when perhaps they'll have a better idea as to who their starting quarterback will be. But Zac Taylor was encouraged or talking up Flacco's motivation that he wanted to get back out onto the field. Dan Pitcher described it with some optimism. So we'll see there. But obviously, if it's not Flacco, then, well, things haven't gone very well for this Bengals offense with Jake Browning running the show.
No, it has not. That's a pretty common injury, although it is painful, especially if you're the one throwing the ball. I assume people watching this, there's a good portion of viewership that is probably like, oh, yeah, I've had that. There's a lot of people out there walking around with one collarbone sticking up like I do every time I go to the doctor. He stops for a second, looks, he goes, oh, yeah, that's right. You separated your shoulder when you're 18. And I'm like, yep, still sticks up. Still, you kind of feel it once in a while, grind or when it's about to rain. But if you're going to play right after, I mean, it hurts. They're going to probably, I found Zach's comments to be interesting. Like setting the stage for like Flacco really wanted to play. He really wants to play. He's pushing to play. So then if he doesn't play, he kind of looks like, Flacco gave it his all. He tried. But then on the other hand, I wouldn't doubt that if they did give him a shot and he did go out there and try it, that he could play. We have seen guys return and be able to throw. I don't know how these guys do it because that thing hurts. Yeah, I'm kind of 50-50. I feel the same way, but he kind of set the stage for it to go either way too. They're pulling a little Jets card here where Jets weren't really giving the Bengals anything either.
It's one of those things that makes you appreciate professional athletes. Like Joe Flacco is not a picture of top tier NFL athleticism, but he's out there taking hits, trying to, and he did return and did play through to finish the game. And maybe it affected some of his throws at the end of the game. Puts that in a different light a little bit.
I thought about that 2nd and 10 run a little bit more, actually.
Mm-hmm. Especially with the 3 timeouts. Like you can understand why they would try to run the ball there. Getting no yards is a problem because if you get 5, then maybe you can run it again.
It was open on film, actually. We never got a chance. We don't end up getting back together and talking about the film too much. But when I watch it, I'm like, oh, P. Ryan's going to bounce that. He's pressing the hole. He's going to bounce it out. And then Jalen Rivers got beat by Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, it just takes one guy. Anyway, puts those throws into a different light, and then also makes you appreciate like I said, Joe Flacco, not the peak of NFL athleticism, but like he's different than you and me.
You saw the first down run. That is peak male performance at 40 years old.
I think he got to like 16 miles per hour on that. And like, yeah, that's the thing. Like this is very minor compared to what NFL players deal with, but I've been dealing with like a minor injury to my left shoulder for like 6 months now. And thinking about trying to like do what Joe Flacco's doing, playing football. He's older than me, man. He's out there playing football games against these peak NFL athletes. It just gives me more appreciation and admiration for what Joe Flacco is doing out there at this age.
One of the best parts, we've talked a lot of downer for the first 30 minutes here on this, but one of the best parts of the season has been getting to know Joe Flacco as a
Mhm.
fan and being like, you know what? He's a cool guy. I understand why fan bases have always appreciated him.
Yeah. That and the run game. The run game coming alive the last couple weeks, that has been a lot of fun. We're not
Tons
gonna
of
get
fun.
to talk about it a bunch today.
Third in EPA now.
Yeah, they've had an incredible run in the last couple of weeks, and what makes it more impressive, and I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop here. Like, I'm waiting for this to hit a brick wall and collapse because it doesn't really make sense to me that it's been as good as it has been. The Steelers have been pretty bad on defense this year. They have a lot of guys that have name recognition on that defense, but the results have been really
Yep.
bad for Pittsburgh's defense this year. And when we look back in retrospect, we'll see if that holds up the rest of the year, but that might just be who they are at this point. The Jets, though, coming into this game at least, and we'll see what they do the rest of the way, had been quite good on run defense. And the Bengals really took it to them in the ground game. And so if that can
They
continue,
confuse
because
linebackers, and it's been a while since it's looked like that for the Bengals run game.
yeah, you got motion for the tight end away from the
Right.
direction of wide zone on one of the explosive runs for Chase
Simple.
Brown, and they've done that a couple times in the last couple of weeks. They're going to have to find the adjustment off of that soon enough, and maybe start running power again with the motion of the tight end and sprinkling in the mix. But they're gonna need that running game to keep going, I think, because we're starting to see the cracks with Joe Flacco. Even if he is able to play this week, and I still think that the level is higher than Brown, and you're starting to see the cracks a little bit in terms of like getting locked on Jamar Chase a little bit too long, the
Mhm.
accuracy starting to show up a little bit, teams starting to figure out, okay, that's what you're trying to do to us. So well, we're going to make you throw to someone who isn't Jamar or T. We're going to get true inside out brackets on those guys and make you find the third option. And you guys don't really have a third option right now, at least effectively, consistently. And so until they have that, I think that will continue to be a challenge. And like I said, you're starting to see the cracks in terms of like the EPA per play in the passing game isn't crazy. It's very middle of the pack, which is fine when the running game's doing this. But I do think that that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Flacco had a hot start and he's taking care of the ball, and I love what he's done so far.
That's a big part of it.
But I think that we probably should not be expecting over 30 points every week, although maybe the defenses they're facing will just allow it, especially if this run game keeps going.
Yeah, that's true, right? They've got a softer defensive schedule, coming up, and that's been a part of why they've gotten on track as well, which we talked about when we originally looked at the schedule. Like, man, what a tough stretch with Joe Burrow going down. Like, this is going to be some of the toughest defenses you play, some of the best pass rushes and pass rushers to start this season. But yeah, I have been impressed with the coaches staff ability to, again, this has been every year, but invent little new wrinkles and things and fixes and figuring out what the counters were to the things they were struggling with, to get the run game going, to get the ball in the Jamar's hands, to manufacture some of these plays and some of these easy button things that, it's like maybe they can continue to be successful. But I'm with you. I think it's hard to maintain that level of play for Flacco. He'd have one of his best years ever if he continued like this. So we should expect it to come back down. Can the running game continue to be a top 5 running game? I'd be shocked, but welcomed. I would love to see it. Maybe Scott Peters is finally getting, the guys to do what he originally planned for them to do, and all that's working together. I think it's actually more of the running backs. I think Chase Brown, Samaje Perine have been excellent the last few weeks. And if that continues, that's great. But with this defense, and this is where we started this, it is such a hard vision to see how they get better. And they were working on tackling individually before and as teams before practice on Wednesday. Tackling has been a major issue. I feel like they're playing hesitant. I feel like they're getting to the ball and not really sure. They're not really trusting what they're seeing or reading. We've had multiple guys turn and run the other way on a play that's clearly, I mean, Demetrius Knight and Shamar Stewart did it within a matter of like 3 plays. And it goes, I don't know that they trust what they're seeing and what they're being told. And it really affects your aggressiveness if you're not confident that you know what you're seeing, what the counter is, how they're attacking you, all of these layers that go into the chess match of play calling. It seems like the Bengals are unsure of what the opponent is doing to them. And because of it, they're not able to run through these tacklers or run through these ball carriers, run to these spots and get there before the running back does. Like all the things that make defenses look good and physical and fast, The Bengals are unable to do any of that right now. And I think that's a coaching thing. And I wonder if that part can get fixed. And if it does, that's where we maybe see the marginal improvements and maybe these guys can start to play to their full ability.
And there's Al Golden comment that he's like, I don't know how much simpler it could be,
I mean,
which,
it's the same mistakes. I mean, like Cam Taylor Britt making simple mistakes again. It's like it's hard. It's so hard to feel like you can add more to your team. You're right. I'm with Golden. It's hard. I don't know what else they can do. They're not doing anything crazy.
and I do think there's like a physicality issue to some degree in the trenches where you got some defensive ends at times not defeating wide receiver blocks as effectively as you'd like. And I'm not talking about like crack blocks where they get blindsided
Sure.
necessarily, like head up, actually getting somewhat blocked by wide receivers. You can't have that if you're a 260-pound defensive end. And the Bengals have a lot of draft capital in those guys, right? So we're talking about some high end picks that have had issues there. Not to name any specific names, but it's everybody that's had issues with tight ends, wide receiver bodies, blocking them on the end. So they have this soft end issue in run defense. They're also not winning quickly enough or in a way that actually gets to the passer, disrupts the passer.
Mm-hmm.
You see maybe some pass rush win rates for Miles Murphy and Joseph Osai out there that aren't like as bad as they might be, considering how little production they've had in terms of actually getting quarterbacks on the ground. But as a team, they're one of the lowest sack rates in the NFL. I think fourth worst sack rate in the NFL. So whatever they're doing collectively, whether it's guys not winning one-on-ones when they have them, which is happening, whether it's stunts that aren't effective, whether it's Al Golden being unable to scheme up one-on-ones for his good pass rushers consistently enough, the way other teams can really challenge protection rules that we see with the Bengals every week, whether it's
Complimentary pass
blitzes.
rush. Can't do that.
Yeah, whether it's blitzes that, you have guys letting up or just not getting home, your blitzes are getting picked up. Like you said, the complementary pass rush, like the overall pass rush plan of the defensive line as a unit, funneling guys toward the guys that are expected to win their one-on-ones. And if they get
Or just
funneled,
a
then the
spy.
one-on-one guy doesn't win. Yeah. Or a
Yeah.
spy. Um, and then you compound that with, like, we've talked a lot about tackling this year, obviously. What's crazy is in the last 2 weeks, the Jets last week, according to PFF, missed 10 more tackles than the Bengals. We talked about the Steelers missing more tackles than the Bengals on Thursday Night Football 2 weeks ago. And part of that, at least last week, was that these guys are taking such horrible angles. You're talking
Yeah, it
about
doesn't
not
even
trusting
count
your
as a
eye,
miss.
that you're not even getting a chance to make a tackle attempt because they're
Yeah.
processing so slow or
Yeah.
think they're faster than they are or just misjudge an angle. And you have guys from the second and third levels of this defense, eyes too slow, not processing information quickly enough to trigger into the run fits when they need to. And as a result, you have guys taking bad angles and just getting run by and not even having a chance to attempt a tackle.
Yeah, so that's where our concerns come in this Bears game. I mean, Ben Johnson is going to give you a lot of things to look at. He's
Yeah.
going to have a lot of misdirection, motion at the snap, guys, blocking across the grain. It's really going to test these inside linebackers and these young guys again. It's going to test their edges. It's going to be a challenge. And then you have a quarterback that is willing to hold the ball, willing to extend and try and create magic. And it to me, when I see that, that's scary to me. It used to not be under the Lou Anarumo defense. Like these kind of quarterbacks, I'm like, oh, Lou's going to confuse them. Now I'm like, I don't know if the pass rush is ever going to get there, and then someone's going to get open behind them.
Yeah, Caleb Williams, this is an example of a ball against Chicago that probably could have come out much sooner to DJ Moore wide open on that little under route, but
It's a great
he
catch
makes
too.
an absurd throw. It's a great catch. Worth noting that like everyone on the Bears defense didn't practice Wednesday. And by everyone, I mean Roma Dunze, I mean DJ Moore, who's making the catch on this play.
DeAndre
Who's our
Swift,
third receiver? Also,
Zacchaeus.
there's another receiver too.
Yeah, Zacchaeus wasn't practicing, right?
I thought there were four. Anyway, it's at least the top three receivers, DeAndre Swift,
The
all of
rookie
them.
from
Yeah, Golden, not
Missouri.
Golden. He's in Burden, Luther Burden,
Yes.
also not practicing for the Bears. There it is. We got there. So one example of Caleb Williams, he's gonna be able to do something crazy. And
Yep.
the other side of this is maybe you can get him to make a mistake within structure because he hasn't mastered the Ben Johnson offense yet. And so you get mistakes like this also against Baltimore earlier in the game. One of the reasons Baltimore starts to run away with it, they score a touchdown after this.
Yeah, because this is a 3-point game with 9 minutes left.
He's just staring down a crosser and really good play by Nate Wiggins to undercut it. That's what your coach should do. But in man coverage, I think just undercutting the crossing route, you're going to get a lot of these crossers from the Bears offense, from the Ben Johnson offense. So when we're talking about one of the things Ben Johnson is going to do to challenge you as a defense, you see one of them right here. You get the play action crosser, and the staple of a lot of these offenses around the league with quarterbacks that aren't Joe Burrow, who can't just drop back pass, are trying to beat you a lot this way. One of the
This will be
ways.
a Jags type of offense, like if an
Mhm.
offense that they played, Vikings as well, but that you'll get a lot of those.
And actually, I think there's a close connection between Jets OC and Ben Johnson as
That's
well.
right. Yes, I believe
And
there is.
and one of the was it the touchdown pass? The last touchdown pass, the running back touchdown pass was a Lions play
Yeah,
that
no, though, and so was the Y leak, the fourth down,
right.
I believe it was.
Uh, yeah, that one's
Everyone
relatively
runs that,
common,
but that
but
was directly a
another
Lions
Ben
play.
Johnson play.
Yeah,
And here's another example of again DJ Moore not practicing, but you got to tackle on the perimeter. DJ Moore hard to get on the ground. You're going to see screen game,
he's a running
and
back.
the Ravens, yeah, the way that Jamar is with the ball in his hands, DJ Moore, not the same. Obviously, there are differences in the way these players work, but like
But that's one
there's
of the
some
closest
similarities.
comparables,
Yeah,
yeah, in terms of after the catch.
yeah. DJ Moore really good after the catch. Always been good after the catch. Back to his time in Carolina, and you're going to see screen game here. The Ravens have obviously struggled as a defense this year too, but something that the Bengals have had issues with is getting guys on the ground when they have a chance to, knowing where they're supposed to be, running the wrong way. There's misdirection. You see the back leaking out on the backside of this one. Is there a linebacker for the Bengals
Someone's
running
gonna
with that
follow
back to
him.
the flat? Yeah, you know, uh, things like that we're going to be worried about with the Bears offense. And a Ben Johnson offense probably is manufacturing a lot of yards by virtue of being a Ben Johnson offense. Here's the last clip that I think I have from. Oh, no, I have two more. This is one of the last ones we have from the Bears offense here. Again, play action outside zone kind of action here. The tight end coming across, and then you just get Roma Dunze putting a DB in the blender
Yep.
wide open there. Dunze is good. So like if these receivers are playing for the Bears, they are going to be challenging for the Bengals DBs.
It's one of the closest comparables to the Bengals weapons. And they've got good tight ends too. And
Mhm.
DeAndre Swift is a good fit for their running game if he's playing as well. They've started to use Kyle Managai more. I think that's how you say his name. 25 there, more and more in the passing game. And the offensive line, honestly, 4 out of 5 are respectable. It's really only the left tackle that is a liability for them.
Yeah, and here you're going to watch Mike Green going against this left tackle. If there's a matchup that you're circling for the Bengals this week on this Bears offensive line, it's definitely left tackle. Drew Dahlman, who they picked up at center, has been excellent. Darnell Wright
Great
at right
signing.
tackle has really put it together. Joe Tooney has still been Joe Tooney.
Mhm.
This Bears
Jonah
offensive line,
Jackson, solid.
yeah, Jonah Jackson. This Bears offensive line, besides the left tackle here, who we're going to watch Mike Green run around, is solid. And that
Yeah.
is not good news because the Jets offensive line, not solid. And the Bengals couldn't do a dang thing against the Jets offensive line. But here you get an idea of speed really challenging with a nice chop, the left tackle.
Yeah, and this is a British Columbia, Canada guy. Remember 2024 draft? There was like 3 of them. I think we saw Byron Matos with the Lions just a couple
Mhm.
weeks ago. So very similar. There was like 3 guys. I think one of them got drafted. This one was undrafted. Normally, I think it's Braxton Jones, who they drafted fairly high, but has not been good either. This guy here has started the last 4 games, been very hit or miss for them.
Yeah. There is an opportunity there. If Trey Hendrickson is healthy, he did not look healthy even before he aggravated his hip injury last week. I would be mildly surprised to see him this week, but the guy's a maniac. So if he can play, he will play. Didn't look like himself anyway. He
Can we
would
just save him
benefit.
for obvious passing situations? Like he doesn't need to be up there so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? That would make a whole lot of sense. The Bears
Of
defense,
course.
on the other hand, statistically, the Bears defense has been really good in one specific area that I noticed when I was looking at a bunch of stats before the game, Joe, which is that they are the second best passing defense on third downs in the NFL. Not every team in the NFL gets better performance from their passing defense on third down. Typically, that's a down where you should be advantage defense if you're in a passing situation on third downs. The Bears are a team that you generally don't want to be in a passing situation against on third down. And the Bengals have been in the middle of the road as a passing offense on third down, even when you filtered it just the Joe Flacco weeks. But against the pass on third down, the Bears are giving up a passer rating of 52.5. That's pretty good. They're allowing an opponent completion percentage on third downs of 52% and
Wow.
just 4.5 yards per attempt. That's a really big advantage for the Bears if it plays out that way. The Bengals, by comparison, giving up
I
a
know.
108.8 quarterback rating on third downs, a 67.7% completion percentage, and 9.3 yards per attempt to their opponents, which are all bad numbers that you would expect from the bad defense that is the Cincinnati Bengals. But all of those numbers, well, maybe not the completion percentage, but the QB rating, the yards per attempt, I think are both the worst down for the Bengals is third down, which is like, how are we at this point? Like I said at the beginning, this should be an advantageous down for the defense. The Bengals have been terrible in third down passing defense.
Yeah, I could have used without no comparison there, Jake. You could have saved that and kept that in your back pocket and not shared that with the world. But thanks for that. Give us one more dynamite here, stick of dynamite. But yes,
Do you want me to make it worse? Because I can.
You got another one? I was going to go to the
Well,
players.
it's just that the Bears are incredible at passing the ball on third downs on offense, and so that is a
Great.
Bear strength, Bengals
That's
weakness.
winning football.
The Bears are averaging 9.3 yards per attempt and 106 quarterback rating on third down passes.
I think the Bears are going to be all right this year still. I know they're like 4-3, but I think Caleb's got another level to his game for sure in that offense once it starts clicking between he and Ben Johnson. But they have two guys in the secondary I really like, and Kyler Gordon, who I wanted them to draft. Is that the Dax Hill year or is that the Miles Murphy year? Either way, he was a guy I really liked when they were at the end of the draft, either 22 or 23. And he ended up going in the high second round. And he's been a good player. He's got an extension. He's a slot guy for them. And then Jaquan Brisker at safety, who we talked about also that draft season because the Bengals were in the market for safeties. And he's a very versatile guy that they'll bring up and cover. And man, he also will. Man, when he's the robber, he is coming down fast and hard, and he will crush people. Also has really good ball skills. I like the way he plays. He's got quite a few penalties this year in the games I've seen, but I like Jaquan Brisker a lot.
They also have Tyreek Stevenson having a career kind of breakout year. I think third year out of Miami, had a game, has a couple of interceptions, I think, this year, maybe just one. 5 pass breakups, 1 interception this year. Tremaine Edmonds for at linebacker for them seems to have finally put it together.
Still
Or
young
maybe
in his like 8th season.
yeah, he's
Remember he was
27
19
years
coming
old.
out.
27 years old in his 8th NFL season. And had flash, like had a good year in Buffalo, hadn't really been great in Chicago, but this year has 3 interceptions of his own. So reminiscent of some of Logan Wilson's best seasons in terms of creating ball production at linebacker. TJ Edwards, the other linebacker for the Bears,
Yeah.
who they got from
Stanford.
the Eagles. And then in terms of the pass rush, it's mostly Montez Sweat and it's been Gervon Dexter, which is interesting. They've obviously had some injuries on this defense overall. Old friend Andrew Billings still over there as well. Noah Sewell playing some linebacker for the Bears, but Gervon Dexter on the interior going to be the challenge for
Big dude.
Jalen Rivers this week. Has been very disruptive as a pass rusher and doing a lot of it from nose tackle. I actually have a cut up that I can run of Gervon Dexter, incidentally, against the Dallas Cowboys. And the
Perfect.
Cowboys have been great on offense this year, but we got Gervon Dexter here at nose and just getting to the quarterback, affecting throws. This leads to one of the Tremaine Edmonds interceptions that we were just talking about here, the one-on-one with the guard, quick win, forces a quick check down.
Just stay
And
up too.
yeah, like playing outside linebacker, getting a win against a tackle
Because he's
back
super tall.
inside.
This is a weird body type for inside and winning as much as he does. We always want these guys in the draft, but like rarely do they actually pan out.
Yeah. So Gervon Dexter putting it together a little bit for the Bears in year 3. And then Montez Sweat, pretty known quantity for
Yeah.
the Bears at edge, is going to be the veteran that tests Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown in this one. But the offense, this is another week where like it's probably going to feel like this for a while, where like I feel like the offense should continue to be able to run the ball reasonably well, should continue to be able to move the ball if Joe Flacco is out there. If it's not Joe Flacco out there, then that confidence wanes, I think, considerably. But the Bears defense has been beatable in many, many aspects. The one thing they've been really good at this year, creating turnovers. Zac Taylor talked about it in his presser on Wednesday, one of the best turnover margin teams in the NFL. But it's a team that I feel like the Bengals should be able to move the ball against, especially at home, and a team that I have no hope in the Bengals stopping when the Bears have the ball on offense.
Yeah, it's funny. Some of the vibes from Chicago and Bears fans and analysts are that, they're down. They're real down after that Baltimore game. I thought that maybe they're feeling like Baltimore has lost a lot of games. Lamar's not playing. We should have this one. They're probably feeling similar to how the Bengals are reeling from this Jets game. But the Bears have been better this year, more consistently. It's hard to say that when you're 4-3, but I do feel like there's reason for them to bounce back, but they are not speaking that way. They're talking like, man, the Bengals are about to put 40 on this defense. And I'm like, really? That's how you guys feel? Well, the Bears may put 41 on the Bengals. So I don't know why you guys are so down. It's been interesting to watch that from afar and see their vibes over there. So I wonder if that makes for a high scoring game if both sides are feeling like their defense can't really stop the other side.
I wouldn't be shocked if it plays out that way. The offenses that the Bears have slowed down this year are the Cowboys, who you credit them for. The Cowboys have had a good offense this year. They only gave up
No doubt.
14 in that game. I think turnover is a big factor here, more than most weeks, especially just the way it goes. It's not necessarily a very predictive thing. Just because the Bears have been good at creating turnovers, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will continue to be that way, especially when it's not backed up by like a really good pass rush, right? Like typically teams with really good pass rushes, you can say, yeah, they're going to affect the quarterback. They're going to make him make bad decisions. They're going to maybe force some fumbles. But the Bears aren't really getting turnovers that way. So I'm not sure how sustainable it is. We'll see. This is probably a game where now I've jinxed things, but the Cowboys are the only good offense that the Bears have really been able to resist. They gave up 52, obviously, to the Jets or to the Lions in week
Yeah.
2. They lose 27-24 to the Minnesota Vikings in week 1. And then they get the stretch of Dallas, which good offense, give them credit there, but they get a 1-point win over the Raiders, who have been terrible, a 1-point win over the Commanders, who have been pretty terrible without Jaden Daniels. They beat New Orleans 26-14. So, they did their job against the Saints defense or the Saints offense, the way we would have liked to have seen the Bengals do their job against the Jets' terrible offense last week. And the fact that they didn't is why we spent 30 minutes talking about Duke Tobin. But then against the Ravens and a backup quarterback and a 1-6 team or whatever their record was, they're pretty bad. Give up the 30 points. Some of that to do with turnovers, like we talked about, but didn't really stop the run well in that game. Didn't affect the passer well in that game. So you can see why they'd be feeling that way.
I'd like to, if somebody is going to make a play on defense, who is it going to be? And that's fair. And I was going to say Jordan Battle because he has this year, right? For his hesitation at times coming down to tackle, which just drove me nuts because he's supposed to be this physical tone setter. I kind of feel like he's played the opposite of what he should be. I feel like it's those two guys getting their hands on the ball. We could really use a Dax turnover or a splash play. I feel like they've used him less and less creatively as they've gone on, as they haven't had that third corner to really rely on. Maybe that's it. That's my hypothesis on the thing. But who on the D line? And you know what? I'll tell you who's flashed a little bit. And I think okay, I've been critical of him. I think Chris Jenkins, he's had a couple of wins, especially against the run, and then he still gets the opportunities to rush the passer. That I think it's coming for him. And it's not that I expect him to be a good player. I just think on film, there's a couple of guys that flash at times. And as it starts to happen more and more and more, I feel good that a play is approaching. And I'm going to say Chris Jenkins.
There's some flashes from Miles too. And the Miles Murphy matchup with the Bears left tackle could work out if Miles can tie it all together. Maybe that's just a good enough matchup where somebody wins over that Bears left tackle, but it's obviously the place where they're going to give the most help to. Don't love the matchup with anyone in Darnell Wright. Don't love the matchups anywhere else for the Bengals in the defensive trenches. And I do think Caleb is better than Justin Fields, and I don't think that's a hot take. So if you had that much of a problem with Justin Fields last week, with his latency, let's say, the processing time it takes for him to figure out where the ball should go, there's some of that with Caleb still as a young quarterback trying to figure out the Ben Johnson offense and everything. But it's hard to find a reason to feel like, we're going to win this matchup here. This is the way they're going to trick Caleb Williams. And because we haven't seen them fool anybody really all year, maybe Aaron Rodgers
Caleb Williams is going to throw an interception to a dropping into coverage defensive end. Let's go.
That would be the first time this year.
The first time they even thrown at that guy.
Not the first time. What do you mean?
Well, it seems like whenever that guy drops, they're like, we don't care. We're just going to throw it to the flat.
Oh, there have been
hasn't tricked anyone.
there have been so many that they've been like, "Oh, you're dropping an end. I'm going to throw it right over his head, and we're going to
Yeah.
score touchdowns." Like that's happened plenty. That's why I
Right.
was
It's
confused about
supposed to
what you meant.
trick them.
Yeah.
It's not at all. They're like, oh, great. That's where we're going.
There was maybe one where they dropped an end into a slant window and it
Mm,
managed to get the quarterback to look elsewhere. I can't remember what team it was, but I do remember that happening once. Just like last week,
there you
they
go.
managed to scheme up a couple of one-on-ones in the pass rush. But we're at an hour, Joe. So
Yeah,
we're gonna
I can
wrap
keep
up
going.
there.
I got
We
more
sure
questions
could.
for you. I was going to give you like, what do you think? Caleb Williams career game more likely. Caleb Williams. This is for the chat. All right, if you're still watching at the 59th minute, this is for you guys. What is more likely on Sunday? Caleb Williams career high passer rating game, or Miles Murphy or Shamar Stewart get a sack?
Oh boy. And you got two players on the other side.
Either
One
one
of two players getting
gets
a
a sack.
sack. Boy.
It's tough. It's not an easy
Well,
question. I'd like to see
well,
what people think.
we'll have you covered after the game. If you made it all the way to the end of the show, you get to hear the reminder that you have a chance to win a Joe Burrow signed, officially licensed helmet this week. Check out First Star Logistics on Twitter for all those giveaway details at First Star Log. And if you've won a giveaway in the past and you just happen to be at the end of this video for some reason, make sure you're checking the YouTube comments after the post-game show for all the details about how to claim your prize. Joe, it's a fun one this week, despite some of the somewhat depressing content that we had to discuss, or subject matter that we had to discuss rather, but always a good time chatting with you. And look, we have a good time doing this, presented by First Star Logistics every week. Like I said, if you're interested in work in the Cincinnati area, make sure you're checking out firststarlogistics.com for all their job postings. See if it's the right fit for you if you're looking for work, one of the fastest growing companies in the Cincinnati area. Until the post-game show, we appreciate you watching this episode of the Jake and Joe Preview Show, presented by First Star Logistics.